I bet you would believe me if I told you there was a one shot happening in the background of season three Corrupted. That there were parts of the story that I just was not done with, and that um, if time permitted, if schedule permitted, there was more to certain people's stories. Not NPCs necessarily, some, and some continue into season four. Some continue into special upcoming events, but I always come back and keep thinking of Quentin Turner. It's rare to have a ranger that is redeemed. It's even more rare to have a ranger that goes the other direction and then needs redemption, and to show all of that. A lot of times there are sixth rangers. It's not something that happens a lot in the main ranger team. And of course, I think my rangers in my version of the ranger verse are very special. They get chosen, they get to give a whole speech, it's the whole thing. So I wasn't ready to be done with Quentin Turner yet, as evidenced by his cursed coin ending up in Power Rangers Centurion, now being held by Leia Mackenzie. But I wasn't done with his mainline story either. And so this is a secret one shot that you are hearing a recap of that happens in this point of the story that none of the main cast rangers knew about until a big reveal at the finale. If you can call it a big reveal at the finale. They know I'm up to shenanigans normally. Um, this is a one shot for Quentin Turner. This is a one shot about redemption. This is a one shot called Battle of the Bands. Now, a fun fact about me in this tabletop game is that there is a mechanic about wealth in the game. It is more flavor than anything that really influences the story. I don't really use it much, sort of like there's also a mechanic for languages, and unless there's like a specific purpose to deciphering a puzzle, or someone wanted to really play um, a second language character, I don't really use it. You know, all the aliens that I know of in the Power Ranger universe from the classic show spoke English essentially. Um, yeah, so I don't normally do that, but it's a big part of Quentin Turner's story. Medical bills are a big worry, as Eddie Thatch discovered. Um, the idea that he loves food, but a lot of it is out of his reach economically, is something that colors Quentin Turner as a character a lot. Also, um, the struggle for happiness. I think it's something that if you're a Power Ranger fan and you live outside the US, you kind of get a glimpse of it. But here in the US, especially, our joy is tied so heavily to how much money we make, how much stress we're under. Um, Anything below middle class, it's which is shrinking. It's so hard to find happiness and to find meaning because the system really doesn't want you to, and it's more aggressive here than in other countries in some ways. And it's something that even though the Rangers haven't really dealt with it, there's a portion of my work that is a little more gritty and down to earth. It's the same reason why the round room exists in this universe, is because if you put the Power Rangers in a Bayside town and then add a military outpost to it, and I know that they didn't necessarily create this for this reason. They created it so their monsters would have access to Earth, but the military getting to see the Power Rangers for the first time, it's kind of interesting. Um, because that's not technology they have. So of course you can't kind of not address that. Sort of like in the Buffy universe, you can't kind of not address why so many people are willing to turn their back on such obvious violence happening on a daily basis. A bit in the Power Ranger universe too. Um, so what is with this preamble? This preamble is to say that this is not just a one shot. This is a thoughtful way of bringing new structure to the universe and answering a couple of questions that have sort of dangled in the Rangerverse. And at least one of those is what kind of ramifications do Zedd and Rita have for the things that they do in the world? What kind of ramifications do big bads have that want to go on and conquer and destroy and end? This living smoke that we experienced in season two is a second iteration of the living smoke, and the living smoke the first time on Eltar that Zedd essentially created the putties in a manner of speaking, and destroyed Eltar in my version of the story, making my version of Zordon a PTSD war survivor, essentially, but still a scientist in some ways and still mystic in others. Uh, so Quentin Turner, who comes from a family with not money and a lot of heartache and a desire to do good, a desire that keeps him from being centered in any one clique at high school, has been through a lot with Zedd. And though no one can say for sure why he said yes to Zedd, there are some implications of why that Leia witnessed that he himself talked to the others about after he was taken out of his Dark Ranger armor by Zedd at the end of season two. And Quentin Turner has spent all of season three up to this point not knowing what happened those 2 weeks either, but at home trying to recover, recuperate, and assess, and having to deal with whatever happened. Maybe silently, maybe not. It's hard to say. And though the Rangers stopped by, it was always sort of off screen and patient. Um, but eventually, even Quentin wants to get out of the house. You need to find a way and a reason to move on. And even though he doesn't know if he can ever be a Power Ranger again, Quentin Turner has dreams. That's where Battle of the Bands come in. His band does still exist. The lead singer is still Michael, but goes by the stage name Michelle in some kind of Gilmore Girls type way. He doesn't recognize the drummer or the guitarist, but he's still the keyboardist. Still Dung Beetle is the name of the band, at least this week. And there is a competition that happens that would get them in front of a recording management company that would win them a bit of money. And it's outside of Angel Grove. It's in a place called Amber Beach. And so the band goes to this place. It's at a kind of Howard Johnson in town, but close to the outskirts. There's like a diner nearby called Roxy's. It's open for them. Um, and they kind of rent the money to make sure everybody has their own room. Uh, Dung Beetle is not the most absurd band name there, but there are a lot of absurd and eccentric people there. Cindy Rain, who's a guitar and vocalist for a 60s female rock Janis Joplin inspired band called Butterscotch Dream, a sapphic death trance band called Virtuous, is there, a black Norwegian death metal band called Devil's Due, and the drummer also happens to be named Andrew. There's a Rat Pack rock band called Casino Head, who have a bass electric guitarist called Dirt, who dresses sort of like 90s guy in flannel pants, but has a giant eccentric red mohawk. A K-pop group with Sarah Tokagashi as the lead vocalist, um, and a whole bunch of other bands. And it's one of those things where Quentin finds some community almost right away. There is a competition aspect to this, and of course, there are a couple of groups that are really into the competition. But mostly people are there to sort of like jam and play and compete, and it sort of has this feeling of camaraderie. It's really nice. To say it's healing is not incorrect, but obviously there's a lot of healing to do. Um, and about the third night of the competition, after the first round of play, and so Dung Beetle makes it all the way into this top 16 bracket, a whole bunch of the kind of lead singers like Cindy Rain and Sarah Togagashi and Dirt and the casino head Rat Pack Rock guy and Clint Georgian, who is the leader of Parliament Tribute the Funk Experience for a funk fusion rock band. Um, all decide they want to do karaoke down by the pool. Um, they sort of talk Quentin as he's kind of going by to get ice to kind of join them, and they're having a really good time. at first. And then there's lightning that strikes. And Quentin's internal ranger tingles kind of go off because it's not normal looking lightning. It doesn't look right. It's not, red lightning like what Zed would do, but it's lightning that seems to strike specifically like at the height of joy. Cindy Rain is doing a Janis Joplin cover while it happens, and it sort of zaps her and knocks her down a bit. Um, and they have to go in search of the generators. The building is getting locked down a bit. People are panicking a little bit, and he hears it behind him. Quentin does. The formation of a monster. Um, and he goes sort of into ranger mode without thinking. He starts ordering people around a bit to get themselves as safe as they can. He's going around searching, trying to find generators in the dark and stumbling, and his heart leads him down to the kitchen. He's by himself, by the way. I will say this. He's given directions to Dirt and Sarah and anyone else he can find to get people to safety. He can hear the cackle of a monster, but it's so dark in the room with you can't really see. You have to have some sort of light. Their phones sort of stop working. It's all very much like something is conspiring here. Um, and I ask Quentin if he has his morpher with him. And he does, even though he doesn't know what would happen, doesn't know if he can use it. He ends up in the kitchen. And in the kitchen, down below, near where the generators are, he finds a yellow energem. Now, he's never seen an energem before, but he knows the color yellow. He's very familiar with it. And this color yellow is his own yellow, whereas the energems at Amber Beach in Dino Charge and Super Dino Charge, there are variations on a lot of the various colors. There's like a graphite one, there's a silver one, there's a gold one. There's not really a yellow energem. And that's because it's with Quentin Turner. He reaches out to grab for it, and there's an explosion of light psychically, because this is the Power Rangers, and Quentin ends up in that middle space where he'd seen his totems before, in this sort of midnight space, and they come bounding up to him and they greet him, and they get to have a conversation with Quentin about what he's done and what's to come. He does not pull any punches. He says he doesn't know why he agreed to what happened, but it did happen. And he accepts responsibility for that. He's currently worried about the current thing in front of him, but that overall is something that he doesn't have any reason to hide. And he isn't, it's not great. It's not a good look for anyone. Um, the totems of the yellow spectrum ask him if he's willing to make amends. They tell him, what you did, what you offered up to Zedd, created a problem that will destroy the whole world. And the only way to fix it is a sacrifice. And that sacrifice will come, and you will know when it's time, but you are not yet strong enough for it. They tell him that he has allies, people that could have become rangers, people that know things, and Skulovich and Bulkmeyer are mentioned as his allies, as people to help him to keep an eye out on the Rangers. And Dirt will be mentioned. And Quentin is okay with whatever has to happen. He knows things are bad. He doesn't know exactly what. He's started to see that the stars have started to go out, and he's seen a little bit of the darkness, and he's experienced it here, even at Amber Beach. Not quite the same way, but enough that he knows. And he's like, I'll pay the penalty, to make things right. And they tell him at the end will be the greatest sacrifice he's ever made. And that if he's willing to go through it there, they have things that can help him that are part of the yellow gold spectrum that will assist him. And in saying yes to this, and saying yes to atoning for whatever he has done, whatever he originally said yes to, for whatever reason, he receives the sigil of Xandar, and he receives a new power weapon that is made of Birdie Weston's celestial guitar. And these weapons are daggers, these weapons are strings, a song of doubt that will make an enemy doubt their place in the battlefield. And the sharpness to the strings of the guitar that will slash hard at an enemy. And they outfit his armor a little bit. He's able to transform into the saber-tooth ranger with this new armor on top from Dino Charge and this new guitar emblem that takes the place of kind of shoulder pads on his shoulders and these pipes down his arm. And he says yes to this. He's brought back to this world out of this pocket dimension with this knowledge that he needs to get Vulcan Skull with him to do recon and to prepare for the sacrifice of whatever is going to need to be sacrificed later on. Um, but that his story is not over, his journey is not done. And the villain of the week, the monster of the week, tries these new powers is called Microphone. It is a living, sentient microphone that, as Quentin re-enters the scene in Power Ranger armor once again, looks like a microphone with arms. It is literally draining the life force out of Cindy Rain. And Quentin goes on to get rid of it, to deal with it. It's not like a monster you face in Angel Grove necessarily. Something is off about it, the way that it kind of crumbles into nothingness. It detransforms, leaving the mic stand where it is. But it's the first time in a while Quentin has gotten to do something on the side of good, which is really nice. Um, the battle is fairly uneventful in the fact that it doesn't seem like the monster thought there'd be any rangers. Um, the more interesting thing is in the coda to this, because Quentin goes to recuperate, there's a knock on his door later from the band member, Dirt, who had been witness to what happened at the karaoke but hadn't seen Quentin transform. And he goes, "Hey, I'm not stupid. I figured out who you were by process of who was there and who was not there. And because the storm doors closed so that people can get in and out of space, there were only a finite number of people that could have been." And Dirt goes on to talk a little bit about his experience with the Rangers from afar and doesn't offer to help, but checks in with Quentin to ask him questions, to ask him how he is, that if he's okay, you know? And for the first time, pretty much in this series, there's an ally that doesn't just know who the Rangers are, but wants to help them in a way where they're there for them more than just as sort of a cryptic bystander. Um, and at the end of the episode, Quentin invites Dirt to come back to Angel Grove with him to be part of this alliance. Quentin uses his cell phone. Now the power's back on to call Skull, uh, because Skull is the less irrational of Bulk and Skull. Um, and they don't have a long conversation, but it's definitely the start of something that's going to happen in the background. of the rest of these episodes knowing what's coming. Because the stars are going out, and the Rangers still can't teleport and still don't know where Zordon is. The living smoke may be gone, but the damage of it continues on and on. But in the background, somewhere, waiting for the moment where they're going to save the world, there is Quentin Turner, and there is joy and hope, even amidst the upcoming sacrifice. We'll see you again for the next episode of Power Rangers Podcast Season 3 Corrupted. Will it be corrupted forever? No, but we're not done yet. More still to come. Nothing but a heartbreaker is pretty heartbreaking, if I do say so myself. Uh, and this episode is going to take advantage of joy, of hope, even of fear. And at the end of it, the whole balance of things might just have been changed. We'll start out today with Brick in this episode. Now, Brick has not had a good or easy time, and without Zordon, it hasn't really gotten easier, but maybe it also hasn't gotten too much worse. Brick gets a text message. Everyone actually is going to get text messages to varying degrees, but Brick gets the first one. And this will set the tone for the episode. It's a professional development day at Angel Grove High, so the students have a half day essentially. So they have the morning. Eddie's going to get coupons for a nice breakfast thing, which makes everyone think of breakfast, which is something they used to do, and maybe they could do again. But Brick's text message is not about food, or even a text from Jane. It's a text from the guy that owns the Savannah Bananas. It's a text inquiring about when his next game is, about scouting him, about maybe having him come to Georgia for tryouts. And this is where hope comes in. Because for those that don't know, the Savannah Bananas is part of a new movement in baseball to do stuff that's interesting while still honoring the game. It's about, crowd work. It's about being playful, but it's also about the athleticism of the sport and sort of the pieces that make it feel, more boring, boring, quote unquote, and making them something. There's Brick has a copy of the book from the guy that created the Savannah Bananas. There's some intentionality behind it, and the phone number does actually match the phone number for the guy for his, contacts as an agent or whatever. Um, and the thing is that there's sort of a rush on it. Is that he's like, "Hey, do you want to fly out today?" It seems like a legit conversation, but Oz goes with Brick to the airport because this doesn't pass the smell test for Oz, but Brick's willing to go even though it doesn't necessarily. And it's revealed that no one can really leave Angel Grove. They haven't had planes land in a while. No one's really in the airport. And there are no flights that day, even if there were flights going places, going to Georgia, going where Brick needs to go. Brick doesn't quite have a breakdown at the airport or anything like that, but it sort of confirms and Oz verbalizes this idea of being trapped, of being unable to leave. It's sort of like as the stars have gone out, their ability to teleport has been gone for a while now, especially messing with time. Oz begins to think maybe Angel Grove itself is in a bubble. Effectively, everyone is trapped in whatever Rita and Zedd have been doing. Or at least Zedd, because none of Rita's hallmarks have shown themselves in quite a time, really. So Brick decides to pick himself up, decides to go out for breakfast, decides to head to class. Um, Unfortunately, what he walks into when he finally does get to school is mass chaos and panic. You see, he's not the only one that got text messages. I said everyone did. And when I mean everyone, I mean including the NPCs at Angel Grove High. And essentially, most everyone that wasn't Brick got a breakup text message from their significant other, and this has caused absolute chaos in the hallways. Um, Brick spends some times doing damage control with his group of friends in the baseball, like trying to get everyone calmed down. Um, and then Cecily starts getting text messages about it. And it becomes clear pretty quickly that these text messages are from the person behind kind of this mass breakup and the thing that happened with Brick, and that it's all sort of coming from Max, who they haven't heard from, who they think might be being punished by Zedd, who had been turned kind of into a werewolf, but kind of not. It's not clear in the text. Um, but clearly someone who at least vibed with Cecily, if not, if was not also growing feelings. And what they realize is that in triangulating the position, because that's something odds can help with and something they can do in relative peace, um, that wherever Max is at, he's being held essentially at Restaurant Row, essentially where they started this adventure at, in that weird dance club where it was like a silent disco and it was siphoning off energy, and where the five beats not Rangers who had stolen parts of their powers were. Um, it's worth it to go. And what they find when they go is monstrous. They find that like Restaurant Row, which had been really vibrant, in this new version of Angel Grove, if that's what it is, this thing where they have to get through a secret wall to get into what was Restaurant Row. It's not really the same. It's desolate, it's quiet. The red carpet that had been laid out for them in like welcoming them to the rave is still there, and it's got mud tracked on it. The whole place is so quiet until they enter into the building, and it's dark. And on the far wall, they can see Max. And Max is in this weird thing where he's plugged up to a whole bunch of computers. He's kind of strapped into the wall, and he's kind of still the version of himself that is werewolf, but he's also been shaved a little bit. He's got all kinds of wires and hoses coming off of him, and um, it's pretty clear he's sending out a signal he's doing all of this. He's sort of via text message and when he can kind of form words saying he's a little sorry for what he's doing, that he's kind of being forced to do it, but at the same time, he can't stop. This is part of his punishment. This is part of what Zedd's doing. Um, the important part of this thing and the continuation of the corrupted journey is that he's wielding two very small axes, and these axes in his hands also um, tie in with panels on the floor. So as the Rangers start to move forward to either help him or battle him, still unsure of which, because it could be a trap and most likely is. Um, he slams down one of the half axes because he's taken the axe that Eddie has been using this whole time, or at least used until Living Smoke happened. And he's slamming it down or into the wall, and a part of the floor shoots up maybe 100 feet, slamming upwards. And it's a connected thing, and the Rangers have to battle over this terrain to even get up to the catwalk. It's not the most difficult battle they've ever faced. In fact, this was one of the first times where there's just a notable absence of henchmen. And it's something, as either the GM that I commented on to prompt them, but it's sort of like we haven't seen putties in a while. Like this isn't following the pattern that we expect as Rangers. Um, Also, unfortunately, pulling Max out of the wall, as one is wont to do when they see him and he looks like he's in pain. And it's very Matrixy and kind of a disturbing H.R. Geiger kind of way. Pulling him out of the wall makes it worse because it wakes him up and he doesn't quite remember who he is necessarily. And even though he's been sending out these text messages, they're sort of coming from his brain, but like being awake now, he's sort of feral and he has to be like brought to himself. Um, and it was a trap, a very dangerous one, but it's not one that the Rangers can't handle. Um, it brings Eddie back to his axe, although now his axe is in two, and he has to figure out exactly what it can do. It reminds him a little bit of the Sentinel axes, the green jungle axes, but obviously not in that color palette and not with the two different powers that had. It is nice for Eddie to have his full armor back. But in all of this, Max doesn't transform back into human. He's still half werewolf even when he no longer has the armor. And at the end of the episode, it's decided that the only place it seems to be untouched by Zedd, because he is afraid of going back to Zedd. He's afraid Zedd's going to pick him up. And in this state, could the Rangers even really protect him? Um, they decide to hide him in what we call Cecily's sanctum, which is that weird room inside of the Dinner and Duels location where she now works and makes quite a bit of money, actually. Uh, this location seems to be invisible to Zed. It seems to exist maybe outside of time and space. It's still part of Angel Grove. It's still there, but it seems to be at least as safe as the command center is perceived to be. And nothing but a heartbreaker ends on a bit of a cliffhanger because now they've had a couple of run-ins with these beats, not Rangers, who had stolen their powers, who would sign these contracts with Zedd, who were part of this missing 2 weeks that is slowly becoming unraveled and starting to make sense. And the question of it all is who's really behind it? What is Zedd's end goal? You know, what is life like after the Dark Ranger? What is life like for Max at this point? And who's next? Nothing but a heartbreaker. It's going to be followed by What's in Fashion, which may bring some answers and may bring even more chilling punishments for people that don't toe the line that Zed demands of them. Still no Zordon, glimpses every now and then of Alpha, but the Rangers are starting to sense a little bit of a victory in reclaiming what is rightfully theirs. And hopefully, at the end of it, everything that was corrupted will find hope. We'll see you next time. What do you think is the most, not haunted per se, but the building in Angel Grove with the most convoluted history? What do you think is the place that has urban legends about it that is not connected to the military, to Area 52? I'll give you a second to think about it based on what you know of Angel Grove, about the Natural History Museum, the radio towers, the Power Rangers. The answer will surprise you no. It's the Angel Grove Aquarium. Now, in Brick and Eddie's lifetime, this has gone through 3 or 4 different iterations. Every iteration is aquarium, something else an aquarium. So where we begin our story, it's not necessarily a surprise, but it is some concern to know that the episode titled What's in Fashion is about the aquarium. Now, a fish market slash sushi restaurant. More sushi forward than fish market. After all, the fish market was in the past and closed down under mysterious circumstances. And of course, they keep building the aquarium right on top of the old aquarium. So now there's a 2-level aquarium, one of which works and one of which is defunct and chained up and does require the group splitting up. It's actually pretty good timing to have a sushi styled restaurant open in Angel Grove, not just because it's nice to have sushi by the ocean, um, but because there are a couple of rangers in a relationship that definitely need a date night, that need to talk through some things because they haven't really had a chance to talk and decompress and deal with what has happened to Brick pretty much since the Wandering Blight. I mean, there's been no time in a lot of ways. Unfortunately for Brick, it can be hard to talk about what has happened, which has left Jane feeling a little alienated. And of course, Jane is going off to the Art Institute in the fall. Um, assuming there is going to be a fall, I suppose. Uh, there's the pressure of everything they've got going on, everything after the fog, everything with these kind of new false rangers. It's a lot of pressure. Missing Zordon, feeling trapped, the unknown. And for Jane and Brick, it's something of a test for their relationship, as it is. Because they're teens with attitude, and in this case, heavy on the teen. Um, so it's date night at the sushi place. Now, just to get some context, every single version of the aquarium slash fish market slash whatever else it was always closes down due to something bad happening. It's an urban legend of sorts. And if you go, you should expect something bad to happen. The first aquarium got shut down because of red tide. The second version of the aquarium got shut down because there was a disappearance. The fish market just shut down suddenly. And in this case, it's very possible this new fish restaurant, sushi place, fish market that rests atop the old cursed aquarium, urban legend style aquarium, might end up being closed because of the new cantaloupe jellyfish they're showing off. They have them in tubes floating around the inner foyer of the building. And so it really does behoove the Rangers to go. Now, something interesting to note is that the other Rangers are pretty easily able to sense the tension because Brick and Jane are not really subtle about there being tension, though what the tension is, they are being more subtle about. Just that there is. And so it's going to be Oz and Cecily and Eddie that are going to check out the area underneath the old aquarium. And Brick and Jane are going to have a date night, but also do reconnaissance, which is a lot of fun. So while Oz and Eddie and Cecily have to go to the lower level, the lower parking garage that's abandoned, they have to sneak around. They're going to notice first that it is very well locked, that there's a grate over the entrance to the aquarium, one of those metal gates that comes down, that there's one of those metal garage doors over it to definitely try to keep people out. And 3 out of the 4 doors, one of which is a big double door, are definitely locked. And one doesn't have a lock. But it's still really hard to get the gate up. So they will be able to enter eventually into the cavernous, Some would think empty aquarium space, but they will find that there are some lights on, and there are sounds, and there is something swimming. And that's probably why, while they're exploring and trying to figure out what's in the aquarium and how deep the aquarium goes and what exactly is swimming, Brick and Jane are upstairs trying to talk and have a conversation, trying to do recon and pay attention, but also really talk about the things that have happened to them, and the things they're worried about, things all couples really try to talk about. It's a nice enough place. They get good seats. There are other people in the building. Everything starts out normal, just like entering the abandoned aquarium. Everything starts out normal. And then, as the appetizers are set down before Brick and Jane, it starts getting a little quieter in the restaurant. And as they finish their appetizers, a little quieter. And it does take Brick and Jane long to realize everybody in the restaurant, from staff to patron, are slowly going stiff like statues. And also, there's no more jellyfish in the jellyfish tube out front. It's just water. The whole thing is pretty eerie upstairs and pretty eerie downstairs, as all of the areas are sort of boarded up and barricaded except for some places on what are called scenic walkways behind kind of the front foyer entrance of the abandoned aquarium that should be abandoned, shouldn't have any neon lights on, shouldn't have any sound or any movement, and yet there is. There's no sight of jellyfish, but as Cecily, Eddie, and Oz start walking on these scenic walkways where they have tubes of water above and to the side and below, it sort of feels like you're on one of those catwalks at a theater, except water all around in a kind of in a really big glass tube. There's a thump as something slams against the glass, a giant fin meant to attack. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of a human heart. It doesn't do Jane and Brick any good now to kind of hide what they're doing, so they go around to some patrons, check some pulses, and everyone's alive, even though they're not blinking, moving, talking. It's Brick's idea to go back to check the kitchen to see if it's in the food, and though it's not in the food, there is an open air shaft that, when Jane looks down, leads down below. And they decide to take a plunge together into the dark and the deep. And essentially, only because they're Power Rangers would they do this, because they know they can, kind of beef a landing. And if they get a little hurt, well, they've gotten a little hurt before. Um, and they take this plunge, and this plunge will land them on a catwalk, almost crashing into Eddie, but not quite. They come up a little bit ahead of the group, but just enough that they could crash into who's ever walking first, just in time to hear another thump and a slam. Again, it's not jellyfish, it's a giant set of fins, multicolored fins, and it's then that Cecily notices the fins have glittery pieces on the end of them, on the end of the tail. It's a giant tail, a giant glittery tail that, when the light strikes it in the water, begins to look a little colorful in different ways. But it couldn't be, could it? Cecily doesn't really have much time to think of it, of course, until she notices the unicorn hilt embedded in the fin. As the thud becomes a slam and a crack in the water, as whatever's on the other side of the fin is using the fin to slam. And Oz tries to propel himself forward, tries to exit, tries to get ahead of what's ever going on, because obviously something is trying to drown them in this water now. Um, to find that whatever is in charge here has put some seaweed that creates a bouncy structure on a cage that has come down, trapping them in this tube of water that whatever this fin is trying to slam and open and drown them. Luckily, as rangers, they have power armor, so they can move a little faster, and they have some ways to defend themselves, but not against drowning. No one has taken the ability to not drown and insulated their suit from that. But what they do have, as they hurry and as they hear cracks, and as they see water seem to seep through the pneumatic tube, as they run forward on this kind of now very long scenic walkway, seem to get scenic and longer, they come across, well, a mermaid grotto. The walkway opens up into this area where it looks like an audience would sit to watch seals perform or something like that, but inside. And there's a woman sitting there, a beautiful woman with a clamshell bra, legally distinct from any existing clamshell bra entity mermaids. Um, and Cecily's sword, broken into three or four pieces. Apparently, the shards dipped in poison, as the mermaid agrees that it's time for them to be poisoned. But unfortunately, the tail is so unwieldy that even though there's a mighty slam and thud, the Rangers are too quick, and as one of the members of Beats is taken down by the Rangers and voids their agreement with Lord Zedd, who they signed with to be a part of the music group, they change their age, melting away, revealing himself to be a 70 or 85-year-old woman, and then a 105-year-old woman, and then, well, when you're not young and you're not old, then you're seemingly dead. It's hard to say. There's some breathing, some rattling of a cage in there. But whatever youth they'd asked for from Zedd has now seemingly been cursed to reverse into an old age that they can only imagine. And as Zedd teleports the failed Beats member out, Cecily looks down at the pieces of her broken sword and on many things that made her angry. But this is more than enough to swear revenge, as that sword is part of her, and that beautiful unicorn hilt should never be made to poison. The question is, what was in fashion? The answer was what's always in fashion, being young and beautiful. But where that leads, well, it leads right to an adventure that next time, if I'm seeing the schedule correctly, will be all about Eddie Thatch, and it will lead to a tremendous choice, and the balance of the universe could change. And this time it may not even be about Zed. It's hard to say. The only way to know is to tune in and watch. But Rangers are starting to find their power weapons again. Question is, are they too late? Or are they still right on measure? May the power protect you, as Zordon would say, if anybody knew where he was. What if I said there was a plot happening beneath everything else that wasn't really about Beats and Zed, but was just as nefarious and contained secrets? that will change the direction of the world. What if I told you there was magic in the world that you hadn't yet seen? And what if I told you that Mr. Thatch, our dear Eddie, was about to experience it all and make a choice that maybe not every version of himself in the multiverse could make? I tell you all this because it's true, and that can be the most dangerous thing of all. We begin today in the farmers markets with a little shopping trip. Eddie Thatch loves to go to the farmers market because he likes to see art, purchase it. He likes to be a part of the local scene, and it's kind of nice in a way to take your mind off of things. It's there he meets up with Oz, who is doing something of the same, while doing some recon as well for trying to figure out what all the bloody things are going on and maybe anticipates what's going to happen next. And of course, there's going to be a putty attack on the farmer's market, but it's just a couple of them. It's not something that the two of them can't handle. Of course, no one else seems to pick up on their communicators afterwards, letting them know everything is okay, and that's a little strange. And then at the bottom of a jug of honey is a note that reads from the guild. Dear Mr. Thatch, you have completed your initial introspective period in the Sleight of Hand Society Guild, and for that, our collective hats are off to you. You have been thoughtful, humorous, and quite dexterous. All those things are very important, and of course, a secret society's sleight of hand and humorous wouldn't be much without one last challenge before true initiation, would it? We wish you the best, and with the highest of regards, yours truly, the Guild. There's nothing else on the piece of paper, of course, but beneath it there is a baseball that's seemingly drowned. Now, the only place the Rangers have been, the only place that can be thought of where drowning has happened recently would be that sushi restaurant, would be the abandoned aquarium. And upon going back there, they find Rick Kerrigan halfway submerged in a tank of water, like one of those old Houdini magic tricks. And there's a man in a maroon and gold trimmed cloak standing there who doesn't interfere when Eddie and Oz enter the room, but who also does not help. Brick woke up there after having met with an assistant coach and doesn't know how he got there. He hasn't been able to get through, and he knows there's magic about because he can't break the locks, even though he can almost reach them. And he can't break the glass. It's tempered, it's too strong. And the only thing that is able to break the glass, able to unlock it, is Eddie Thatch. Now, once Brick is freed and calmed down slightly, because when you wake up half submerged in water, you do tend, with the tank filling, you do tend to be a little panicked about it, of course. Um, Eddie is handed a card by the man in the robe. No real harm will come to your peers and compatriots and you reach them in time, as long as you succeed in the things and skills you know. Houdini's tricks are not the only ones available to you. Will you be able to find all of your loved ones in time? And you'll note here, Oz is not among these candidates. Oz is with Eddie. It's almost as if they don't even really register Oz being there. And not that anyone can tell because there's a mask over the face of the person, and when Eddie at the next location with the clue, the little paintbrush that's found in the corner of the tank, realizing this paintbrush and the red paint are about Jane. The voice is familiar to Eddie. It's a voice he's heard 100 times, and he's only met him once, and now he'll meet him again. It's the head of this guild, but only after going through these hoops, for there's no real way to know but to solve the puzzles in order to find his friends. Because Eddie knows that if he doesn't play the game correctly, something bad could happen to anyone. Jane's paintbrush forces them on a bit of a hunt to figure out where Jane could be, and it leads back to the art gallery, the art store, where Jane acquires a whole bunch of her paints. And of course, she'd gone there this morning quite early for a sale of some kind. And there are a whole bunch of Lego pieces on the counter that the person stocking buys and says they don't recognize, but they do. And by the time they get to the Elgard community event space where they had defeated that Lego putty, brick putty, legally distinct entity, um, Jane is freaking out because she has been cask of amontilladoed into a wall. It's not hard to get Jane out of the wall, but Jane and Brick and Oz and Eddie all sort of notice there's definitely magic here that has the ability to dampen their morphers, their communicators, doesn't allow them to actually transform. But it all depends on Eddie being able to get them out of these traps, to break through the wall using skills, not necessarily brute force, but he does do that. And apparently it's allowed. Um, he gets a picture, a card from the person that's keeping watch this time, who won't talk, and even when with threat of punching, will not talk. But they don't need to go far because Eddie recognizes the picture on the card, and it is the old Wisperium Theater. It's a broken down, blocked off theater that's been out of commission for a decade, but Eddie felt it was likely the location of something because that's where the sleight of hand meetings are. Um, you have to learn how to get into the building. That's one of the first things you learn. But when Eddie arrives with friends in tow, very worried about Cecily, he realizes it's open for him. As he goes in the lobby with the others flanking to help, but being locked out by a magical ward of some kind when they try to enter, Eddie is left to his own devices in the lobby. There are candles all over the place, all over this lobby where he'd bought candy before, because refreshments are available during the guild, the Sleight of Hand Society. And people in cloaks. He'd seen maybe one or two cloaks before, but never of this indication. And it doesn't take him long to get to Cecily, who is strapped to one of those wheeling, round circular boards where you spin and then throw daggers. And he intercepts daggers before they can get close to Cecily. But Cecily wasn't too concerned. When she woke up, she worked really hard to start freeing herself. And there are some things that even the guild is not as good at as they think. Cecily sticks by Eddie's side, partially to make sure nothing happens as the head of the guild begins talking to Eddie about finishing his initiation with a signature on a form. More to the fact is that as Cecily and Eddie go into the library, adjacent to the auditorium where Cecily had been on that spinning board, an auditorium that used to be where they showed old movies. There was even an old organ in the corner. Cecily recognizes the room, but she's never been in this room except for the fact that there's a portrait of a bookshelf in this room and a candle on that bookshelf. a candle that Eddie should light if he were to sign. Both Eddie and Cecily have very high reservations about Eddie signing, and he's really not interested in doing it. And here's where the dice tell a story because it is a bit of a spellcaster's battle. Um, it doesn't take long for Eddie's not wanting to sign, not wanting to become an official part of this guild, feeling the power of the grid flowing through him and realizing that if he signs, something bad will happen and would have happened if he'd been hypnotized into doing it, into sacrificing essentially his Power Ranger power to become a member of this cult. And what kind of cult is it? What is in this contract that Eddie could have signed but chose not to in this universe? And this contract is giving all of your soul to a being called Malagor. And when Eddie doesn't sign, when Eddie's signature would have brought Malagor back up to full strength, very pissed off, three-quarter strength Malagor is awakened and summoned, and Eddie and Cecily rejoin their friends outside the theater in time to see the Wisterium burst open as Malagor, the lava demon, in other places and iterations, the beloved of Divatox nonetheless, wants to attack Eddie's choice to remain a Power Ranger, to remain with his friends, to take all of the secretive training he'd been doing for the last year and some change, however time is working, honestly, since they approached him way back in the middle of season one, actually, noticing how good he is at what he does. Not as a ranger, but as a person. Not knowing they had snagged a Power Ranger in their net, but knowing there was something special about him. Well, facing a demon does have a way of making sure that you have your priorities straight. And Eddie, of course, was not going to ever shine. But the righteousness of what he does, of how he tries to free the others from their bonds, and he goes about attacking Malagor, allows him to transform, to level up into a level and transform his power weapon to give himself the sort of Viking persona, even as a ranger, to give himself a cape, to give himself fur gauntlet cuffs, to really go all in on the ice feature of Brent Mastodon, who does not appear but does not need to appear. Something about this game is that you don't have to be as big as the monsters you face in order to succeed. And with the few righteous slams from his power weapon, which was recently returned to him nonetheless, thanks to Max being found and freed, means that Eddie Thatch is the hero of this story, of this particular day, as he takes down a whole cult that were ready to cultivate him and strip him of his magic and his power and power friendship, though that does seem rather cheesy. Unfortunately, this loss of power is enough that the familiar friend that Eddie had made outside of his Power Ranger group that was the head of this cult sort of lost their mind, sort of just disappeared, all in general right before Eddie's eyes. But unfortunately, sometimes, for the good of things, that can't be helped. Also, Viking Black Ranger with a appropriate Mjolnir-like axe. Or there is an axe in mythology. That's a fancy name. I can't remember what it is. But what Eddie Thatch becomes after making this choice makes him stronger, makes him realize that though the world is changing around them in ways sometimes they can't predict, oftentimes, that they are stronger, not just together, but they are stronger than things that plague them, which is a good lesson to learn. because Eddie isn't the only one who's going to learn that lesson. It's time for Jane to reclaim fire, passion, and the grappler. We'll see you next time. As Zordon would say, if he was still here, maybe the Rangers don't feel they need him as much as they used to. May the power protect you. Jane versus Fire is an episode with some subterfuge to it. As the GM, I know that players expect a certain number of things, and of course, these players have started to wise up to the idea that the Beats, as a Power Ranger team, have not attacked as a team since the first episode they were all together. It's what separates them actually from most of the evil Power Ranger teams in the universe. And I think this episode might be the farthest anyone goes to find their armor and weapon. Jane gets a note in her locker. It's signed from Alex, her friend in the art department, but it doesn't really look like his handwriting. Maybe he wrote with his opposite hand. And it says in the grand tradition of graduating seniors, you're it. Find the coolest, most dilapidated subject, and then take a picture and pass along the camera to another graduating senior until we have enough for a full collage in the yearbook. The address, Jane doesn't know. That is the suggested place, but as she takes it to lunch, Rick's face pales a little bit, and he tells her not to go alone because it's the address of the family where the son disappears and the mother becomes a Scorpina. Now, of course, in this universe, Rick seems to be the only one that even remembers about the Lee family, but it's enough. It's something, at least, even if it means Rick is carrying a bit of that guilt still. Jane is pretty capable, though, so as long as she takes him with her and kind of looks out, the whole group doesn't really feel like they need to go. This should have been the first alarm bell because everybody else in the group got a message from me about this and what was going to happen. So a lot of people thought this was actually quite amazing. Um, the house itself is abandoned, but not empty when Jane goes. The house hasn't been dusted inside for quite a while, but she doesn't need to like really break in when the doors is just sort of unlocked enough to get in. It almost seems like a shrine to a family that just picked up and left everything behind. There's a layer of dust everywhere, and the person that goes with her stays downstairs while she goes upstairs looking for something to photograph, and she ends up falling through the floor and falling through time. And this is the part of the episode where all of the players, save for Jane, transition into someone familiar, yet different enough. Jane does land on a field in the past, and she comes across Eobard Thatch as she stands up. Eobard Thatch is Eddie's ancestor and is a sheep herder and organizer of winter holiday celebrations in the township of Angel Grove. I get cursed at a little bit by Jane, who is now called Jane, as an older timey version of Jane. And Eobard Thatch describes a floating fire imp who he will not call a witch because they do have a town witch. Um, and Eobard notes that this floating fire imp who has been setting houses afire has been breaking the bonds that tie Angel Grove together and making his sheep a little nervous, making it hard to, make sure the sheep can the wool and the meat can come into town to be used. And that this floating fire imp is really breaking the bonds that make things important. The Angel Grove Township is in a verdant and lush, mostly green area just outside um, of a desert location that you can just kind of see in the distance where there are some caves and things like that. Um, Eobard can't say exactly when the floating fire imp appeared, but only that it has been uh, plaguing the town. Eobard does suggest that Jehane go into town and visit the witch to make sure that the bump from her fall, as she puts it, can be tested and cured if need be. He recommends the witch quite, um, not profusely, but quite well. Uh, the witch is Salem Adwell, Cecily's ancestor, who has been having visions and um, trying to write them down as she has them. In fact, her apothecary shop, as it were, the walls are covered with these sketches that when Jane sees them, she drops the camera and then will forget it in the past, um, which is part of how all of these pictures will end up eventually in Cecily's sanctum, as this is the exact location of that place in the future. Salem sees herself as a witch, but also as a physician, an apothecary, a druid priestess, if you will, all the things that a city needs, and she was doing quite well. The visions were painful, but at least she had the town in the waking hours, but with the floating fire imp that calls itself sometimes a witch. She's begun hearing murmurings behind her back, and there are people that are now averting their gaze from her in the marketplace, and there are some people that aren't even showing up for medications and salves and tinctures that they need anymore. Jane notes in memory that when Cecily had gone to the past, she had seen kind of this mechanical being floating in the treetops sending down fire bombs, and that it is not hard for correlation to equal causation here. Salem and Jehane have quite a conversation about what has been going on both in the town and in their lives, as Jane talks a little bit through with Cecily's ancestor and tries to make sure not to butterfly affect things too much, but gains quite a bit of information about this floating fire imp. And of course, it is Neat, the name of the person that has Jane's, the other half of Jane's Red Ranger armor and her power weapon, the Man Catcher. Um, the drawings of the things, the visions that Salem has been through are vivid and familiar as things that Cecily and company have faced. Nothing new, though. The visions don't seem to continue from exactly about this moment in time. But Salem is still having them, so it's hard to say. Um, she offers travel with Jehane for whatever Jehane needs, and Eobard is going to show up as well eventually, trying to help. Peacekeeper Bakken Kerrigan comes by, who is the Vice Justice of the Angel Grove Township. He keeps the peace, he's quite fair, is not superstitious like the others, and hosts a sporting program in town that throughout the year makes sure that the children of and teenagers of town have an outlet, different types of sports, um, and just generally keeping the peace. Lets Jehane know that the floating fire imp has been setting, especially Pecan's roof on fire, which has been very difficult to deal with and is not good for health to have that much cold air. Uh, Bakan is special to this, not just because Bakan is Brick, but because Bakan, um, who is Brick's ancestor, has gotten the closest to where the fire imp uh, is assumed to live, which is one of the caves on the outside of town. Indeed, of course. Um, There's a fork in the road. One way goes toward a trading pier, and one way goes toward the desert, and that is the direction the fire imp has gone in. Uh, as Jehane heads out to try to confront this floating fire imp, not knowing exactly how, Bakan suggests stopping by Harold Forge, so aptly named because of the grief-stricken traveler, um, who is grief-stricken over the loss of a son from the township where he used to live, Quintus, who lost a battle with scarlet fever. And this Harold Forge with the blacksmith Harold lives, who's also named Harold Forge, um, is the ancestor of Oswald Richards Oz, the Green Ranger. And this forge specializes not just in smithing shoes and things like that, but also in creating a variety of weapons, should the need arise. Not too many, just three or four at a time. And he does happen to have a couple. Right now, a sword, a long piece that can be used as a pipe. And it seems like as Jehane reaches Harold Forge and the proprietor Harold, um, who is still a little bit in mourning and very much pissed off at this floating fire imp, who they only know as a floating fire imp because the imp has not addressed themselves. The imp has just said that um, they're going to destroy Angel Grove, and they're going to do it on their terms, is what they have said. It's about that time Jehane realizes that she left the camera back at the witch's shop, but there's no time to go back. And as Jehane goes forward with this group of ancestors who were really friends, as the descendants are, um, she comes to the cave where it looks like this adventure will turn to battle. And unfortunately, as she crosses the cave entrance, a great fire springs up where the others cannot follow in right away. They will be able to eventually get through the fire, but in the beginning, um, one, as Jane rolls, it seems like the walls are undulating of this cave a little bit. It's a very big cave, very round in a way. And it seems like it's breathing? Question mark? Which is a strange thing to say. It does shudder a little bit as this battle will unfold, but it's so hard to say exactly what it is. And sitting in the middle of this cave place is Neat, a member of Beats, who has taken Red Ranger armor and the Man Catcher and has modified it to shoot these fireballs and help with levitation. Since it has that maneuver capability, it's essentially creating sort of a broomstick thing, really, except it's something you hold as you float. And unfortunately, as well, the creation of what is called the perversion. And this is something that should not be. It's the King Sphinx taken from Jane's original initiation dream, but turned into this Sphinx-like monster that exists to serve and can shoot this lava fire pit out of its mouth. And so Jane and Eobard and Bakan and Salem and Harold have to battle this perverse monster from Jane's nightmares from back when she had no one, all while Neat taunts her and tells her that she has no courage, that she could do a much better job, that Neat has been here this whole time and doesn't need anyone. Fireballs are going off, and there's a giant sphinx monster lighting fire everywhere. But even without Power Ranger power in that way, it is still 4 to 5 against one. And something interesting happens is that when Jane takes back the power of the Mancatcher and takes her armor back. Two things interesting happen. One is that Zedd doesn't show up at all the way that he showed up previously, either to teleport, to admonish, or to cause someone who fails him to age and essentially die in moments. What happens is nothing. And that silence is filled by anger of Neat assuming, unlike Max, that the contract that Neat signed meant Zed would always be there for her. And while Neat rages on, Jane is able to purify and call this beast her own, the Sphinx, to turn it into purifying white fire and create a ring of safety around Neat that will basically ensure that Angel Grove Township will prosper, as it's a line Neat can't cross without power armor to get across it. And as I said before, the cave walls seemed to shudder and breathe a little bit. And it doesn't take long as the ancestors sort of shuffle off back to town, back to their duties, to realize the inside roof ceiling of this cave looks remarkably like a tortoise pattern or a turtle pattern. And it's there where the Power Ranger legend comes in that in this universe, when Zedd came to Angel Grove during Devil in the Details, during that weird time period where there was an egg that was turning people against each other in the funhouse, the egg is revealed to be Tor, one of the mightiest Zord companions that has happened in the Mighty Morphin Power Ranger fandom. And the case of this Tor exists inside of time, but also outside of time. And recognizing the presence of Jane from outside of time is able to teleport Jane through time, but leaving Neat in the past without any protection and trapped temporarily in a circle of fire. Jane feels Tor's presence and is able to get out of there with her power weapons and armor. And it's sort of this thing where she gets to float above the world a little bit and watch it as time continues on, watches the town shifts where it is a little bit as the desert encroaches, watches time change. And then one day, as Tor slows down and starts to sink down back into the earth, she steps out to realize as a rocket hits and its Alpha 5 exits from that rocket and goes, aye, 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 that this is her Alpha 5 unit. And what has happened is that Zordon has just landed on Earth after the war and is stuck in a cracked cryo chamber that Alpha 5 will have to build around in order for him to live. She has some words for Alpha, words of hope and comfort, and hoping that things can be as they should be. But before anything can be said that should not be said and would have a butterfly effect on time, Jane is teleported through time a little further until she can be teleported home again, but with her powers and with a determination to tell Eddie and Cecily and Brick and Oz about the ancestors from Angel Grove Township, and also about the oddity of Zedd not even showing up this time, and how strange it is, but how good it feels to be a little whole again and to know that no matter what happens, at least she was there at the beginning of the story and was there to see Zordon and Alpha land on Earth. And hopefully some good can come out of this mess. And hopefully there's no more traveling through time. Hope does spring eternal. Unfortunately, while hope springs eternal, as the leaflets floating on the ground show, the circus is also in town. And that, my dears, is coming much sooner than anyone could have ever dreamed or dared. As Zordon says, both in the past, in the present, and in the future, may the power protect you.